that subject, in fact, because for years, we've been pretty much the best of friends. The English, I am, of course, pretty obviously English myself originally, and the French, where I live, here in France. The English have brought great culture to here in France, from Shakespeare to their heart of gardening, even to their sports like football and rugby and even the good old cup of tea. But now, all that is at risk. I'm talking, of course, about Brexit, and with me to discuss is the author of a new book. It is called La France anglaise. Here it is, the revolution of the revolution to the present day, rather. Diana Cooper-Richet is a researcher at the Centre of Cultural History of Contemporary Societies, that's complicated, at the University of Versailles. Thanks very much for coming in and talking to us today. A very historical tie-up, isn't there, between the British, the English and the French? I mean, do you really think at this stage that it's at risk?
I'm not sure that it's at risk, but at least the Brits who live in France and who have houses here are very concerned about the future and what Brexit can be for them. So they're worried, and there's a lot of uncertainty, and that sort of makes the worry even greater.
If you're a Brit then living over here in France, or perhaps just owning a property over here and coming over for holidays, what are the things that people are really worried about?
Well, in fact, it means there are quite a lot of people worried, because there are the figures aren't very clear, between 300,000 and 600,000 Brits who have properties in France. And they're very worried. They're very worried because they're worried about, are they going to be able to move regularly inside Europe? That means, will they be able to come to France, to their houses, freely as they have been doing for years? They're worried about their health insurance, Sécurité sociale. Will they be able to be looked after freely in the Sécurité sociale centres? They're worried about their cost of living. Some are even thinking of perhaps going to Spain, where the cost of living would be cheaper than France. They're worried about, will they be able to use their passport? Will they have to ask for a carte de séjour? Will they have to be fluent in French, which is often not the case? Some are even worried about the driving license. Will they be able to use a British driving license in France? Some things are very detailed, and you can get an idea about what they're worried about if you look at their websites, their blogs. There's a blog called Pensioners Debout Stand Up, and on that blog you can see all their worries, all their concerns.
I mean, that's such a long list, isn't it? There's so many things that obviously concerns people, and this is just one faction of people. This is just people who are living over here in France. Presumably, well, obviously, all of this is supposed to be sorted out with a deal, isn't it?
Yes, but for the moment, there's nothing very certain, and it's all sort of, well, perhaps it will be this way, perhaps it will be another way, and people don't know, and that adds to the worry. And if you read their newspapers, there are newspapers, special newspapers published in France in English. For instance, The Connection, there's another paper called The Bugle, Bugle Dordogne, Bugle Limousin, and they explain all their worries, and week after week, or more like month after month, you can read that the solution's not brought. They still have no solutions. They don't know. But what's interesting also, it seems that it hasn't discouraged Brits, because a lot of people are trying to buy houses, notably in Dordogne, still now, because they think, perhaps I can buy a house before it's too late. And there are even real estate agencies in Dordogne more numerous than they were a few months ago.
And of course, it's the timing as well that's so crucial, isn't it? I mean, the actual Brexit isn't until next March. Some people might say, well, we've got ages, of course, before we need to pin all this down. But there has to be an agreement really in place a long time before that, so that all the different governments around Europe, including Britain itself, can ratify the agreement.
Yes, and that's what it really worries them, I think, is that there's still no perspective. They still don't know. But what's interesting, I think, psychologically, is that it's never discouraged. It hasn't discouraged them. That's what astounds me. I think it goes back a long way, and as a historian, I would say the Brits have always loved coming to France, and that's true since the Grand Tour in the 18th century, and they still like coming to France. I mean, even if they're thinking, some of them, of going to Spain, they still prefer France.
of course, there's another answer to this. Just get French nationality.
Yes, well, if you look at figures, I think in 2016 there were 1,300 Brits who'd asked for French nationality, and in 2017 there were 3,000, and a little more than 3,000. 1,500 of them obtained French nationality. So, of course, that's the best solution, isn't it? But it's not possible for all of them. And some of them, of course, are thinking of going back to Britain. But if you go back to Britain, you're a second-hand citizen, because if you've not been living in Britain for 15 years, you're not allowed to vote, you're not allowed to take part in the political life. So that discourages a certain number of them.
So people are definitely already going back home, you think?
No, I don't think that many are going back sort of voluntarily. They're all trying to see what's going to happen. And if it wouldn't be best to stay.
And just finally, if all these issues aren't sorted out and it does remain a problem, how much of a regret is that for people and for you as well?
I don't know. It's difficult to say. I think reactions are very different from one person to another. It's a shame, but it's always been difficult inside the European Union between France and Britain. It's an old story, isn't it?
OK, thanks very much for coming in and talking to us today. Diana Cooper-Richet, there's the book, La France anglaise de la Révolution à nos jours. Thanks very much for coming in and talking to us here on France 24.